Okay, so I'm here with Isaac, and we're going to be explaining insulin resistance through the cell model today. So let's focus on this cell. This is going to be a healthy person with no insulin resistance. We have the nucleus, and we have the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, the GLUT4 transport protein, and then we have two doors. So you have the fat door, which is for long-chain fatty acids, and then we have this insulin receptor, which is going to be for glucose, right? And it's moderated by tyrosine kinase. And so what we want is to get metabolic flexibility, which means that we're drawing from different nutrient sources to get our energy. So when the fat door is closed, we're going to be getting our energy from the glucose door. It's going to be open, and vice versa. And during exercise, both of these doors are actually going to be open at the same time, as long as you're not drinking something that's high in carbohydrates like Gatorade, because then we'd be going back to this carbohydrate door. So, in the standard American diet, we're going to eat a meal, and we're going to get a lot of carbohydrates in the form of fructose and glucose, and free fatty acids, and we're also going to get a lot of amino acids from our proteins. And so let's focus on the glucose. So what's going to happen is your brain, your hypothalamus, it's very animalistic, and it's going to sense its survival. It's going to sense this spike in your blood sugar and say, hey, we need to bring this down. So what it's going to do is it's going to go to your pancreas and say, hey, let's make insulin from your beta cells. So it's going to secrete lots of insulin. And insulin, for the sake of the drawing, we're going to make it a little triangle. And it's going to fit right in that receptor. It'll fit in. And when it fits in, it binds. That signals the GLUT4 to come up to the surface and bring all this glucose into the cell. Okay? So then that glucose, we can use it for energy. And so there's two pathways we can do this from. Oxidatively, in the mitochondria, we can get 36 units of ATP, which is good. That's a good number. Or we can do it from a fermentation pathway, which will give us 2 ATP. Now that's not as much, but that's when we don't have oxygen in anaerobic exercise, right? And so we're trying to conserve, and that can happen during HIIT or like running sprints, something like that. That's quick burst, and that's good. Long term though, that's not as good. And so then what's going to happen, you can only do this with about 30 grams of carbohydrates. And when we exceed that, what's going to happen is the rest of the glucose is going to get into triglycerides in adipose tissue by a process called de novo lipogenesis, right? And then because this door is open, the fat door is closed, so these free fatty acids are also going to be made into triglycerides. And then the amino acids are going to be used for reconstructing into protein, so we can recycle our protein. So that's in a healthy person. This cycle will take about 4 to 6 hours. It'll take one wave of insulin. But in someone who's insulin resistant, we're going to get a lot of insulin being made, right? And over time, all this inflow of insulin is going to damage the receptor. So it's not the nice triangle we had before. So it's not going to fit. So this won't bring up the GLUT4. The GLUT4 is not going to come to the surface because it doesn't bind, right? And so because we have insulin around, the fat door is going to say, well, we're going through a carbohydrate pathway right now. There's insulin. We don't need to be working. So the fat door is also going to be closed, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to end up with that same fermentation pathway we had over here. And we're only going to end up with 2 ATP, which is not good long term. And so this is why people who are insulin resistant will often say that they're feeling tired or they're feeling hungry, right? And so that's not good long term. And there's a couple ways of fixing this insulin resistance. It's not permanent. It's very reversible. And one way is through exercise, remember? We said both these doors can be open. So we're going to be flexible. We're going to be pulling from different nutrient sources. Or we can change a diet. And so here, the glucose is usually, in the standard American diet, our preferred nutrient. It gets digested first, and so we'll be going through a glucose pathway. But if we change our diet and have a high good fat diet, moderate protein, and like a low carb diet, we're going to be going straight to this fat door, and that's what we're going to be using first to get our ATP, which is really helpful. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, but like, what does it mean if you aren't able to like change your diet, or if you don't change your diet and you
Like
stay insulin resistant for like
long term?
Yeah.
Insulin resistance is a precursor to type 2 diabetes. So it would be helpful to change it. And like there's a lot of drugs that could help with this, but the best way is through lifestyle change and diet and making sure that you can be metabolically flexible.
Makes sense.
Cool.